Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Straight Talk Whiskey. I'm Nick, and we're here for episode number 29. Now, I just want to kind of set the tone for the rest of this review. I know I said last week that I'm going to do kind of a double review, going over the next step in aging your own whiskey at home, as well as reviewing a whiskey. But actually what I'm going to do is just review the whiskey because after kind of getting this recommendation from a friend earlier in the week, I decided to do some research and just look around. And actually what I came up with was quite substantial. There's a bit of controversy out there about this in particular, so I thought I would just dedicate one review to the whiskey review at hand instead of going into the next step in aging. So this will be next week, I promise you. But for now, we're going to focus on the whiskey. What is it? Most of you probably haven't seen it. This is Widow Jane Straight Bourbon Whiskey, aged 8 years, using pure limestone mineral water from the Widow Jane mine up in Rosendale, New York, about an hour and a half or so north of New York City. Now, the distillery, the distilling company, is based in Red Hook, in Brooklyn, not the Red Hook, also in the Hudson Valley, like the mine is, which is what it's named after. The Widow Jane mine is kind of the stepping off point for the name of this whiskey. It's in Rosendale, and what's unique about that is the water that's been passed through the limestone, for 100 and more years. Really kind of creates this perfectly pure, mineral, nutrient-rich water that is trucked down to their distillery in New York, for the bottling process and distilling process. But it's a different kind of line, their heirloom line of whiskeys that it's used for down there in the future whiskey that they're producing. I believe they also do rum, and they might do some other things like chocolate or something like that. So possibly there's water used in that process for that. But this is where the controversy comes in, because we don't see anywhere on here that it is distilled in that distillery down in Red Hook. And like I said, this is where the confusion comes in, because I believe there was originally a magazine article or an article online, I can't remember which, that had a picture of, I believe, I think the picture was a 7-year-old at the time. This is the 8-year-old, obviously. But that specific whiskey that was pictured was not distilled in Red Hook. Now, I know there's a lot of controversy that came out of this saying, oh, it's misleading, the packaging is misleading, because it's obviously, it can't be distilled there, because, if you do the math, and the distillery started in 2012, and these problems were starting to irritate people around 2013, 2014, at the latest, anybody with, half a brain, like you and me, would put together that they couldn't possibly have gotten an 8-year-old whiskey in the course of a year or less. So, that logical train of thought must make you think, okay, maybe this distillery, is just starting out, obviously, and like dozens and dozens and dozens of other brands that are NDP, non-distillery producers, what they're doing, and there's a lot of brands out there. If you want to do some research and look at, stuff that maybe you drink regularly, and it might not matter too much to you because, you just enjoy it, and that's mainly what it's about. But you will find that a lot of it is distilled elsewhere. There's been controversy with Bullet bourbon, that it's not actually distilled at some fantastical Bullet distillery, which, by the way, I do believe it's being built, or a distillery is being built specifically, that'll be kind of its flagship bourbon that will be produced there. in theory. That's kind of just news that I've heard around. So anyway, getting back on track, we have to look at this. And you have to read the whole bottle, and this is where, like I said, the problem comes in. The pure limestone mineral water from the Widow Jane mine. Yeah, okay, that's perfectly plausible, because you can bottle it. Just because you distill something elsewhere doesn't mean you can't bottle it in Red Hook, which I believe they have done. If you look on the back, oh, it says Kentucky Bourbon. Pretty interesting, because that probably means it was made in Kentucky. Now, and I know I might, for people who are a little bit more educated on this, might say, well, originally they didn't have that on their label, and that might be true. Again, I say you need to go back and put it in context. If it's 2013, 2012 even, that you're saying, oh, it's 8 years, it says, Rosendale, New York, it says the distillery is in Red Hook, in Brooklyn. Common sense, folks, you gotta say, okay, that can't be possible. The math isn't adding up. You can't, like I said, the 8 years, blah, blah, blah. So, most of where this whiskey gets produced at that time, in the early stages, would have been MGPI in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Now, like I said, you can go back and look at a lot of the whiskeys you might be drinking and see that that's where they're made. And this company, they don't sell the MGPI, they don't sell their own brands. Basically what they do is they just sell that whiskey back to these companies, and what they can age it, and they can bottle it and sell it and that sort of thing. But that's where they get their whiskey, and they have all different sorts of mash bills, recipes that they can prescribe, that they want, which is obviously why all those don't taste the same. But you knew that, you're smarter than that. So that is where this was originally made. Now it says Kentucky Bourbon, and now you're probably wondering, scratching your head, saying, okay, well, MGPI, that's in Indiana, how are you going to put Kentucky on there? So, logical train of thought now here. We'll say, okay, well, this must be made at some distillery in Kentucky, and they're just not saying exactly which one that is. At the end of the day, with all of the things that we could critique about whiskeys, having no age statements, having no information such as when it was bottled, which bottle number, barrel number, being a measly 40% ABV, this is 45.5, 91 proof, aged 8 years, it's saying that right on there, and it's saying that, it's Kentucky Bourbon. They're not being misleading. They're not just going to put in boldface. I mean, you got to think of it as being a distillery owner, being a company owner, and are you going to put on here, oh, Widow Jane, made in Kentucky, big lettering, that sort of thing. No, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to create something down in Red Hook. Obviously, they don't have the aged product enough to be putting that out just yet. They're working on it. This is what dozens of other distilleries have done in the past. So, this is nothing crazy, nothing new. And they're using, they're sourcing and growing their own grains for, like I said before, their heirloom wine, certain whiskeys that they're creating right now. They're making those from, getting them from local farmers, not genetically modified kind of stuff, which other people are doing too. They're not the only ones, but they're making their own. They're experimenting with different types of corn predominantly. Just tasting this, I do sense it's got a little bit of a rye sort of essence to it, which we'll get into. So I don't know if that's kind of a plan for the future with their other whiskeys to get a little more rye content, which, I think it definitely makes it interesting, for sure. But, so yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I know, the big whiskey blogger out there, Chuck Cowdery, I can say his name, originally wrote an article to combat the earlier one I talked about with the photo of this whiskey and then talking about it being distilled in Red Hook, which was just an error, you know. It happens, you know, everybody's not infallible, everyone's not perfect. So, anyway, that long-winded kind of rant, and I'm sorry for that, but, you know, I really hate for companies like this that you don't see everywhere because they're letting, you know, word of mouth and kind of that sort of approach to get it out there to people, and they want to get it out to quality, you know, quality people that are going to be, you know, I guess respectful of it, that sort of thing. They're not like mass marketing it to, you know, all 50 states and exporting it everywhere, you know. They can get there naturally, you know, as the word spreads, because, you know, before kind of going through the whole whiskey itself, it's good. I really enjoy it. So, anyway, I just kind of wanted to put a positive spin on the whole kind of controversy and, you know, kind of get behind them as a distillery, and I would love to try some more of their products. Unfortunately, you know, with it being small and not kind of getting around too much, I'm fortunate enough to be in New York where kind of the small liquor stores around here are selling this, but, you know, when I move back to the home base in a couple days here, it's not going to be as readily available, especially where I live, state of Pennsylvania. Getting whiskey shipped is a no-no, you know, because we still have to hold on to those prohibition laws that we just can't seem to shake for whatever reason. You know, it's 2015, but as we know, that doesn't mean much of anything for a lot of certain aspects of how we live today. But anyway, we won't get into that. Let's get into the whiskey, because that's what you're here to see about. And especially, I hope this reaches a lot of people in New York, because I think they should go out there and buy a bottle. Price-wise, about $60-ish, which is not terrible. Obviously, it's a bit higher than you're used to paying, but that's what you're going to get for more quality. Oh, I spilled a little bit there. But yeah, so looking for you know, stuff that's more quality, and so that's what you're going to get with this Widow Jane. The 8 years has been a good 8 years, I must say, because it definitely has a great kind of full package, full-bodied flavor to it. So, like I said, 91 proof, you know, 45.5% ABV. Color, it's got a nice light golden color to it. Like I said before, if you kind of twirl around a little bit, you start to see the legs forming there. Always nice. It's going for the nose. Now, first, what you kind of get is this this hot sort of spice is what I'm getting. It's got sort of a like a woody, raw woody oak to it. Maybe I don't know if it's younger wood really that was used, but it's definitely kind of got this fresh wood note to it. A lot of the tannins that are in the oak, I'm getting that sense. Definitely a solid base of vanilla in there, some nice toasting, it seems. But also, strangely enough, is you get, it's not overwhelming, but it is a dominant sense of orange, kind of this orange zest mixed in with that spicy kick that you get. And I'm not just talking about, you know, the higher alcohol content. It's kind of just like a, it kind of just jumps out at you a little bit, and just real nice citrusy, bubbly sort of thing going on. So let's give it a taste. Definitely getting predominance of that orange kind of zestiness going on there. It was really nice. It's really kind of this fresh orange, fresh squeezed orange going on in there. That raw kind of oaky sense to oak wood coming on in there. some real earthy, real down to earth kind of taste going on in there. And sweet too, with little hints of honey that kind of stick on the tip of the tongue. That vanilla that we talked about, definitely in there. But a real nice kind of warming sensation going on in there. Not just because obviously it's higher in alcohol, like I said, but it's got kind of just these really homey, outdoorsy kind of notes to it. I'm not really eager for winter to come, but when it does come, I'll definitely look back to this as a nice sipping whiskey for a nice winter cold evening. But then at the same time, it works for summer because it's kind of got these light, fruity, like I said, the orange notes going on in there. Slight bit of leather going on in there. And the honey, definitely. It's kind of like if you kind of just kind of move it around the tongue a little bit and just swirl it all around, because you've got all different sort of taste buds in there to interact with you. You don't have to swish it around like mouthwash or do that sort of thing like, some whiskey reviewers do, which I've mentioned before, so I don't really need to go into that again. But, yeah, so you can really pick up kind of this orange sense to it, orange fruit sense, but then you also get kind of like a, while that's swirling around on the palate, you kind of get this just slight like trickle down of this honey note, really sweet, kind of thickish in texture and palate there, going down, but just wonderful. For all the controversy surrounding this and all the negative press that some people have had. Now, I will say that there's also been some great press, too, which has been featured in, a bunch of magazines, a bunch of newspapers, especially the online sources. Once you cut through all that BS, all the negative stuff, you just want to find these people and say, here, have a glass. And hopefully that'll shut them up enough to say, okay, wow, there's a lot of other things I could be complaining about right now, and this is not one of them. So, yeah, let's take one last pass at it. Make sure we don't leave anything out. I will say though, because I had this a little bit earlier, you definitely do get a lot of the rye sort of kick going on in there. It's spicy, and we attribute that to some of the fruitier notes in there. But I'd be interested to know what exactly the mash bill kind of ratio was here. Obviously, predominantly corn, but definitely a good nice punch of rye in there. And I found that if you leave it out just a little bit, what you start to get is more of the classic kind of bourbon vanilla, the smooth like charcoal kind of texture to it, which is nice in and of itself. It's good to know that like an 8-year-old, if you leave it out a little bit, it's going to simmer down, and it can stand up to it, because a lot of things, a lot of bourbons, a lot of other whiskeys you leave out for even a short amount of period without covering it or something like that, you tend to lose a lot of those flavors, which is unfortunate, but you don't get that here. What you get is a nice sort of evolution. Things change. I attribute it a lot, and this is kind of a stretch, I know, but Redbreast, Irish whiskey, if you kind of want to take those and kind of parallel them, as if you pour it first and just let it sit out there and taste it over time, and what you'll get is a unique experience as you taste it, which is definitely fun to take note of and experience that. So I think we'll call that it. It's probably been long enough on this. Definitely has my endorsement. If you can go out there and find it, please do. Spread the word, and that sort of thing. But for Straight Talk Whiskey, this has been episode number 29. I hope you'll come back again soon. And until then, drink responsibly, and see you then.